Fingerprints on Metals. This is Season 1, Episode 2.
Deuce.
And Scott Hudson is alongside myself, Reiff, and thank you for being here and wherever you might be around the country, around the world, as this is being posted on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe, Fingerprints on Metals, and you can subscribe there. And but tonight, Scott, we're gonna get into heat and the effect of heat on training and managing hot weather, because here in the northern half of the United States, it's coming. And when the heat comes to Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, Kentucky, it hits. There's no ease into it. And so having a plan, being prepared for it. And then as we look sort of the long view of cross-country season, as people quickly make the transition at the end of track season here in the spring and really start to put their mileage and planning together, summer camps for cross-country, kids on their own before work or after work. And we just felt it was very important to get into that component because as we've had our fingerprints on metals, a lot of that's been in the heat.
Yep.
And some of my hardest working days at track meets, cross country, have been certainly because of the environment. Yeah,
definitely.
So, but what a day! Today is Boston Marathon Day and Patriots Day, and we had folks that we're familiar with who participated. Barry Keane
from Butler,
Yep, Ireland, Ireland's top marathoner in this year's Boston Marathon, participated, was an All-American several times at Butler University. And so really great. Barry, what did Barry finish?
2:13:01.
Yeah, which put him at top 30, top 40?
38, top 40.
Okay.
But I think this may have been his first marathon.
It was his first Boston.
First Boston, okay.
He ran, where did he run? Out west around Thanksgiving. I can't remember the name of the marathon, but ran a qualifying marathon out west before Christmas around Thanksgiving time.
Qualifying for Olympic standard or just
to qualify for Boston.
Got it.
And he runs with the BAA club out there. I don't know all the details. We tried to get Barry on the show tonight, but we didn't quite connect. Would love to get his perspective or a runner's perspective post Boston Marathon. But that was today. And just going back a little bit, I know you were in Atlanta on Friday at Georgia Tech. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Georgia Tech. Our son runs at Lipscomb, Bing, and we went down there. He is a steeplechaser, and you're very familiar with Georgia Tech as you were there for the...
Yeah, it was the village for the Olympics in '96.
So great track facility down there. It was what we thought was going to be a hot night. Turned out to be a cool night, but the kids right now in college are trying to get their standard, so 48 from the east and 48 from the west, make the regional. So that's what Bing's trying to do.
Yeah.
He went 9:10. He was sick a couple weeks ago, and he went 9:10, and just a step in the right direction. And it's hard. Running's hard, and hitting your marks are hard. And so it was a great meet down at Georgia Tech. And then you were...
Well, and you said they had the lights on the track.
Yeah, they had the lights now. So
the pacing lights.
At Raleigh Relays a few weeks back. Now they're doing the pacing lights. So they set the pace to 8:52, which was the regional mark for the East region last year.
Okay.
So if you can get 8:52 or better, you're probably going to be in the top 48.
Yeah.
So they had the pace lights on there, and so you had a pacer too, a kid from Georgia Tech, Billy Carlton. He went at Raleigh Relays. He went 8:38, and so he was pacing a teammate. And his teammate hit an 8:58, and Bing was about 10 seconds back, 9:10-ish. So, but it was good, great meet.
Yeah, well, good. That's great. And you were mentioning Friday night I went to the south side of Indianapolis to Franklin Central High School. They have a tremendous distance festival, the Flashes Distance Festival. And I went by myself. I called my son on the way down. He goes, "So why are you going?" And I said, "Well, you should know why I'm going. I enjoy the sport." But I didn't know a soul that was running. I saw a few coaches and around the infield and so forth. And Some of the coaches are in better shape than their athletes are. I love watching them as they go cheer them
Well,
on
did you
the
see 'em when they-
coach them on the back stretch, and then they're sprinting
You see
across
him
the
look, I
infield.
heard of Buffalo. They
Yeah.
go from the front stretch to the back stretch, front to back. It's a
No
great
doubt.
meet to go to. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And what they do, if you're not familiar, the Flash's distance fest, everything's 1 mile, and so they have freshmen only, freshman girls, freshman boys, and it's just so cool to see them, their own age, their own class, and thinking, okay, there's the future of Indiana distance running, right?
Yeah.
And they're from all over the state, from up in the region. I know Warsaw was there, Columbia City, Princeton from down south.
Concordia Lutheran,
Yep, Concordia Lutheran.
Bloomington South, Bloomington
There
North.
were a lot of great schools there. And one of the races that I really enjoyed watching, one of the heats of the men's mile, the boys' mile, sophomore, junior, senior, there was I blanking on his name, but it was a runner from Pike High School. And he was the whole first 3 laps, he was hanging in there from fourth to seventh. And I went back and watched the race. That's why I know this. And because then he just had it in the tank, and man, he took over. And I'm anxious to see how the next month goes for him. Myler out of Pike High School here in Indianapolis. But
The only time they run a mile too, right? Because
Right.
they're going to run the 1600. So
yep,
this is a chance for kids to run the mile, the true mile, and they do it in indoor. And then this is about it here in the state.
yeah, they were doing a lot of conversions over the loudspeaker of
Yeah.
at 1600 meters it would be this and so forth. But it was really really good, and the kids cheering for each other. It was a fun meet from that standpoint. And another collegiate meet that I kept my eye on was Oregon had an invitational this weekend, and Travis Gepford, who's the head coach at Kansas State. We know him through the decathlon, Thorpe Cup, the decathlon, heptathlon meets that you and I have worked. And Travis was an assistant at Arkansas for a number of years, really tremendous horizontal jump, right?
Yeah.
Long jump, triple jump, great coach there. And but his women's team won that meet, and the men finished second. He had 3 long jumpers that took the podium. So just, I think it's his second year at Kansas State. He's just doing a tremendous job. But one more story about the Boston Marathon, then we'll get into this subject tonight. It was the winner today on the men's side. Both the men and women were back-to-back winners.
Yep.
So they won it 2 years in a row. Matter of fact, the first 3 places on the men's side beat the all-time Boston record.
Yeah, it was 201, right?
Yeah, 201. Yeah. So John Korir from Kenya ran a 201.52, but he fell at the start. So the whole pack runs, and they separate the elites. And I saw some video people were posting of the elites coming out of the hotel in the morning. And I've been fortunate enough to work there at Boston and be in the elite hotel right by the Boston Library and so forth. And they have this sort of cheering section as the elites come out. A lot of caffeine. They were bundled up and carrying their cups of coffee, and then they put them in buses and go to the start line. And so I've been on those buses that go out to the start, and then you come back and work the finish line area medically and so forth. But they really do a great job taking care of the elites there. Got your own medical staff, got all your physios, your massage therapists, everybody there. And it's really a nice environment. But anyway, so John, he falls and then gets up and wins the race. And his everybody's splits are available. You can read them, but 4-minute miles all the way, 4:47, 4:29. He was all over the board, but just tremendous. But it made me think back. And those of you who've been around track and field cross country, you've seen athletes fall and things happen, right? And sometimes it can take you completely out of your zone of what your prediction was and where you were and so on and so forth. But I immediately flashed back to 2013, the World Cross Country Championships over in Bogotá, Poland. And we had on our men's junior team. Now, the juniors at USA Track and Field, USA for the IAAF, all these acronyms, they bring a juniors team and a seniors team. So the juniors are typically high school,
Yeah.
and they're in the spring and they're going. So he went to Stanford, but it was Thomas Graham. Thomas Graham. So we're back in and you've worked world championships. You stay in the cabins because you're working all the time while the races are going on and the athletes come back and forth. And the kids came back, did a really great job, but it was a frozen surface, but the sun had warmed up the top layer and made it just slop at the starting line. And so he slipped, fell, and he came back into the cabin afterwards with his shoulder was bruised. He was just caked with mud, and it was all in the first 20 meters. And his glasses, he wore glasses, and his glasses were crooked and bent, and he was as happy as could be. It was just the grit, you think he could have laid in the mud and he could have had 10 excuses why he couldn't race, but he got up, and those kids, they also come back, the runners, and you're cleaning out spike wounds all the time after those races because the spikes are getting spiked in their shins, and it's a battle in those European international cross country events.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They make mud pits.
Yep, mud pits.
Jump over hay bales.
Jump over logs.
Yeah, because you had.
Yeah, well, I had one that
spike.
They actually bent the spike and bent it out of the screw hole, and because they came down a hill, and they actually drug just this huge log, and so you're coming down the hill, and then you have to figure out: am I going to jump the log? Am I going to use the log to go? Because then there's immediately a left turn, and so when we were over there for the practice day before, and the weather was decent. And everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to navigate this log because of the turn that you're coming right off of it? And one of our racers had athletes came back and looked at the bottom of his shoes. And yeah, those long spikes were just bent back like teeth. Oh man, unbelievable. So those were cold events, and but we're going to talk about heat. And I want to get a couple of things from a terminology standpoint. In this education here tonight, when we talk about heat, particularly around distance events, whether cycling, running, race walking, and the heat just changes the whole game. And so heat from a technical standpoint is what we refer to as hyperthermia, and the body overheats and it just can't dissipate at the rate that it needs to keep the core of the body cool. And then the other is hypothermia, where you can't warm up enough. And I was talking to Chris Troyanis, who did his 50th Boston Marathon with the medical staff today in Boston. And Chris is an athletic trainer, has just done an extraordinary job of management for the Boston Marathon. And I texted Chris this morning and I said, cold morning. And he said, yep, hypothermia is on the menu for the medical staff. And what Boston does, it's a really great setup medically, is you've got finish line, the wheelchair crew. So if anybody stumbles at all, they seat them in a wheelchair and get them out of the way. All right. And then you have tent one, which is triage, and that's where we have our heat deck. So anybody that has a core temperature, rectal temperature of 103 or better, or worse, 103, they're going to go to the heat deck. And in there is where we have ice immersion, and we have paramedics, nurses, athletic trainers, emergency physicians, and it's a great setup. And there's usually about 8 tubs for ice immersion. If you're better and you can be released, or you just walk by and think I'm doing fine, and you're thinking, okay, I got to get about 6 blocks down to where my basket is, and my family's along the way. Hypothermia is usually going to hit these runners at about the third tent.
Mm-hmm.
They get down there, it's about 150 yards from the finish line, and the adrenaline's gone. They slow down and they just get cold. And with highs today, we're in the low 50s to mid 40s, and then you hit the shadows of those buildings, and you might get a little wind off the water in the bay, and got this sweaty body really churning a lot of heat, but man, you can't warm it up because you don't have enough energy, and you just start failing. And so hypothermia is something that, while we're talking about heat, I can never ignore the effects of heat, rain, wind, and you can get into a dangerous chilling environment. We had this 10,000 meters for the U.S. National Championships here in Indianapolis many years ago. Started the race at about 9:30 at night. Beautiful night, and it rains. Then a little rain sprinkle comes in, and then a breeze hits, and they're just cold. We had to transport 2 athletes because we could not. Right there, hypothermia. We couldn't get them warm. They're just shivering, and didn't really know their name, and so emergency had to get them warmed up. So you have been you are an athlete, and you've spent a lot of your time, you and some others, Tim Weber, Doc Weber, do ultra events.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your ultra events, but really from a perspective of planning and from considerations of the heat. And when you're going around the clock, which I know you've done, you're dealing with darkness and cold and early morning changes of temperature with sunrise and all those things. But talk about it from a heat perspective.
You're going to start at 6 a.m. in the morning. So you have to prepare. You have to bring everything that you want to wear. You're going to bring extra socks, extra shoes. Let's just take a loop course, for example, because that's the easiest. You have a halfway aid station. So you're going to put clothes that you want to change into if it's really a hot day.
Okay.
Because if you're going to run in the same shirt all day,
yeah,
you're not going to evaporate the sweat, right?
So let's talk right there. If in the course of training or whatever the event might be, if you've got an opportunity to change clothing, it makes a significant difference, particularly to the upper part of the body. I always talk about football players and lacrosse players. If you can change your undershirt at halftime or in between periods with lacrosse, it really helps dissipate the heat.
Yeah, change your shirt, hard to change the shorts, but most ultra runners wear some type of pack, 2 water bottles on the front. And FYI, you always take an extra I take more than I need, so I can pack 2 shirts in a Ziploc bag, throw them in the back of my pack. They're going to stay dry.
Yeah.
Then I can dump one at the halfway point and put the new one on. And then obviously in the night, it's going to get cold. So then you start to, depending where you're running, you may get cold at night, so you might need a 3rd shirt.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever gotten in trouble from a heat standpoint where you've had to oh boy, I'm over the edge here?
I was in Milwaukee working, training for the LA Marathon. And Confucius say, don't train in the Midwest in the winter, then go run in LA in the spring. And great training. It was awesome. Went out to LA and it was about 75, 80 degrees. I had trained in 55. We were training inside an ice rink to do our speed workouts at the Pettit Center there in Milwaukee. And I got out there and I was feeling great. And I went out too fast, probably 7:30, 7:45s. And by the halfway point, I knew it was done. And I started walking and I just stopped because I knew I couldn't go anymore.
So what was the trigger when you say you knew you were done? What was it? Were you out of it mentally? Were you totally fatigued?
Dizzy.
Okay.
Fatigued.
Yep.
Started to cramp.
Okay.
Walk.
Yeah.
And it zapped me. So I was at mile 19. I said, where's your next big aid station? They said, 24. I'm like, are you doing all right? And I go, I'm just going to stop. And he brought me a big gallon of water and I sat by a tree and just kind of waited it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of shade. There's not a lot of shade in LA.
Yeah. And that's one of the things you talk about, big bottle of water and waiting it out. In the that's something that has changed in the last 20 years, has been how do we manage athletes who become dehydrated. We used to, in the 90s, be quick to IV an athlete. We would be quick to IV and let's bounce them back with an ingestion of fluids through a vein, and it does get them out of cramping. It really saves the day. But research and just a safer way to do things is to drink your way out of dehydration and to sip your way back in using electrolytes, water, but just going at it. And that's a debate sometimes when somebody's sitting there and you're cramping, and sometimes you just don't have access to an IV, but you can drink your way out of dehydration.
You got to do
for
that
sure.
on ice and a lot of those aid stations at the ultras, especially when you get out west and you're running. They're going to have ice there, so you can throw it in your cap. And you have to slow down. That's what people don't think, right?
Right.
They catch a hot day, they catch a flyer, and if you're training to run a 10-minute mile for 24 hours, 30 hours, that mile may drop to 12 or 13
Yeah.
because your heart rate's going to get too high in the heat. So you have to manage those things.
Yeah. Acclimatization, we've talked a lot about that term in our careers. Acclimatization, there's rules put in place for some sports that you have to have a certain number of practices before you put on full equipment, like in football, to acclimatize. One of the things that has always worried me and been a concern with athletes of all sports over a summertime, particularly, and I'm thinking mostly college here, but working athletes, the adult athlete, the pro, that may be indoors, right? And so somebody might have a college runner, may have an internship, and they're inside from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and now you've missed the heat of the day, and your training occurs sort of sunrise or sunset, so you're tailing off a little bit. How do you advise somebody who's in that kind of environment to try to acclimatize themselves and get used to a heat element?
Yeah, I think on the weekends you got to train. You got to train what your race is going to be. So where's your race going to be? Are you running out in Wyoming? Are you running in California through canyons and high humidity in the summer? And so on the weekends, that's when you train. Train during the day, and that kind of becomes your acclimatization. Because what do we do here in the sun with cross country?
Yeah.
All teams start at 7 a.m., right?
Right.
They beat the heat.
Yep.
And then they go and work their job or do whatever. And then when we have that one-off day in early September that's a hot day, well, they've never trained in it outside of when school starts, and they're training it from 4 o'clock on.
Right, and because of travel and so forth, the meets might start at 10 a.m. and that might be the first time they've raced at 11, right?
And
the first time they've trained at 11 a.m.
Ton of meets, right?
The second round.
Start at take the Brown County, 8, 9, 10. As the day goes on, the times get slower, right? So the senior varsity girls and boys run early, like at 8 or 8:30. And then you still have JV because it's such a big meet at 11 or 12. And then kids got to realize that if they didn't train in that, to go even a 15, 20-minute race. Yeah.
And so from a coach's and an athletic administrator standpoint, I fully understand why races start when they do.
Yeah.
You've got a meet, you've got to manage your transportation cost, you've got to manage your transportation time. How do you get the athletes there? What time do you get them up? So it's a good student athlete experience. And so the races start, and sometimes it's pretty hot. It can get humid with the moisture coming out of the grass and so forth. And then the ones that really worry me are those midweek cross-country events that happen at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the athletes have been indoors all day, or they haven't really eaten since 11 a.m. And all of that contributes to really poor performance and really putting them in a deficit, from a caloric deficit as well as typically a hydration deficit. I just wish, sometimes I'll be at a meet and you see all these participants lined up. I just wish they all had meters on them, right? Like little information bubbles over their head. So you could say those 40 are dehydrated, and we better really pay attention to that group. And these 3 are really good, and they're going to take off. And so those are really crazy things. But let's talk a little bit about how do we measure the heat, and we within athletics pay a lot of attention to the wet bulb globe temperature, WBGT, and which is a combination of the ambient air temperature, the moisture in the air, the amount of direct sunlight. And so it's those 3 things that come together to give you this wet bulb globe temperature. And that's what we in athletics now are using as the guide. And so calling the National Weather Service isn't going to give you the wet bulb temperature for where you're at. And there are so many apps, resources that unfortunately there's so many it can become very inconsistent. And so I've been in situations where you'll be at a cross-country event, and you have an official with one app, 3 coaches with 3 different weather apps, and there's no agreement on it. And then you have to determine whose app are we using to yellow flag an event or black flag an event. And so one of the biggest things in planning is to have a trusted resource to get your weather information. And today, it's a long list of commercial weather companies that provide that detailed information. And 2 of the bigger names, Perry Weather out of Texas, is a really good athletic focused weather company. And then there's one here in Indiana that I really like called BAM, BAM Weather, and they're out of Franklin, Indiana. And the beauty with those services over using your app is that you can communicate with those groups, particularly BAM. If you have their service, and they're not paying for this episode, they're not paying.
No.
This is if I were a high school administrator, I were a high school coach, college coach. Well, I know at Butler they have a weather service that they can go to, and everybody's on the same page about the operations staff. So your police and department on campus uses the same device, and all of your coaches and athletic trainers. And so we have one number, and we have one system, and we write all our policies off of that. And so one of the nice things with BAM is that you can chat with a meteorologist. And so if I'm putting my plan together for tomorrow's practices, I can have a chat with the meteorologist and say, hey, we're going to be running at Eagle Creek Park tomorrow at 7 a.m. What's the weather going to be? What's the wet bulb concern? Tell me what's happening. Or, hey, we've got to meet at Garin High School at 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon in September, and it's 92 degrees. What other effects are there? Tell me exactly what the wet bulb temperature is going to be at 4 to 5 o'clock, and then everybody's on the same page. I just love that service. It just takes all the, I wanted to say all the stress. There's still the stress of, gosh, we've got to shut the meet down, or we've got to move it maybe 2 hours later, and try to avoid it, because they can tell you that and say, you know what, if you wait, this is really good with lightning and storms and so forth. If you start that meet earlier, or if you wait 90 minutes, you're going to be in a totally different environment. And that's the beauty of those systems. So we used to use a thing called, and some people listening may remember a device called a sling psychrometer, where we would pour water on a wick and then we would swing it around. I used to swing it around at football practice, and the coaches would look over and go, "Oh, Ralph's swinging that thing around. We better hurry up and get practice going because he's going to measure something that we don't like, right?" And but the thing is, having a consistent, accurate, and I did this for several years. Having an app, trusting the Weather Channel for your location is not accurate.
You did that with IndyCar, right? For BAM?
Yeah, with IndyCar, we used the BAM.
A lot of the teams have that.
The BAM system
strategy with that.
Yeah. And so they knew when the weather was going to change, when the shadows were going to come to turn 4 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and where they're going to change their strategies. So a lot can be done because we're spending so much time outside in the environment, particularly with track and field and cross country. All your training's outside, all your practices, everything you're doing. Wind speeds with your discus throwers, wind direction, all of that. Pole vaulters. How do we set up our track today? We've got multiple directions where we can put our pits. Well, let's go this direction because the wind speed is going to be certain things at different times. So it can really be advantageous.
Just like Doha, right? They set up Doha at the World Championships in 2019. Jacob Crow was there as an athletic trainer.
Yeah.
It was hot outside, but inside they cooled down that arena, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, that's another topic for, but so
Yeah.
the runners could run.
Yeah. Yeah. But my advice going back to this is one person on a staff ought to be in charge of those numbers. And you have to trust it. If what you have today are 5 apps with 5 coaches, you need to pick one and live with it. And don't debate and argue and so on and so forth. You've got to live with that. That's my advice. And sometimes it's the athletic trainer who's inside in a facility and not out where it's happening and so forth, but they're reading good information and that kind of thing. So we talk about how do we measure it, and then just wanting to give some tips about planning. We've talked about it a little bit, but time of day is so critical. And we know that time of day sometimes is dictated by legacy or history or routine or work, jobs, etc. But I think and you mentioned it on the weekends, I think it's really important when you can to get out in the hottest part of the day. Even if you go for a walk, let's say you've got an internship and you're in a classroom and you've got a chance to be outside now at 11:30 a.m. for a half hour, go outside and walk.
Yeah, you got to walk.
Yeah, and just get used to it and feel the environment and get used to that. I would tell athletes sometimes to put on a bucket hat or something just to hold the heat in to make it harder, right? This sport is hard, so you have to embrace it. And doesn't mean you necessarily cancel a practice when the temperatures are high. You just have to moderate. And there's great learning that comes from that of what the athlete can learn. Keep that diary. How did I feel today? What was my ingestion beforehand? What did I do in the last 24 hours? What were my lifestyle choices relative to my training goals? And then we also, I want to talk about around the heat and so forth, is how do we recover from the heat? And recovery by itself is a huge topic. It's a huge industry. But one of the smartest things that athletes can do is take a cold shower and really start to help the body cool itself. There are certain areas of the body where blood is closer to the skin, the neck, behind the knees and the groin, the wrist, the feet. Those are great areas that if you can cool those first, put cold spray, even tap water.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're out there, you're burning, you're rolling around 95 to 100 degrees to 102 degrees, and the top of your head is just hot. Just putting tap water, pouring a bottle of water on your head just helps to dissipate that heat. And that's what we're trying to do with all of this. Talk about electrolytes and fluids. What are your favorites?
How about Coke? Mountain Dew. No, I'm kidding. No, during late in the race, if you're doing an ultra, you need a little shot to the veins. But Gatorade was always a staple. I think LMNT right now, that's a good one.
Yeah, but what are the ingredients that we're really
Oh,
after
we
with
want
all of this?
we want
Besides the
sodium.
brand name, I know that
Oh,
all that,
sorry,
but
yeah,
nope.
sodium, potassium, um, magnesium is a big one out there now.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's what I like, and I just need some and a little sugar in there too, right?
yeah. So that
Because
we know, and we don't want to step on the toes of our favorite dietitians and so forth
correct.
about hydration and the Gatorade Sports Science Institute and all these great places. But carbohydrates are a great source to push and help retain fluids. So having that's why some of the electrolyte drinks have a carbohydrate
Yep.
element to them because it helps with the transport and the absorption factor. But the the bottom line is having fluid and making it a lifestyle choice, so that what you do the night before, in preparation for those things, and I think about myself when I'd get ready for even for work in the hot weather. I made a lifestyle choice of what I was going to drink and make sure I was really hydrated.
Yeah, I think you got to do. There's people out there now. They do water. And they do whatever it is you're going to drink. Water and an electrolyte drink. Flip that off because kids just drink water, water, water. There's no electrolytes in there or no carbohydrates, right? So you have to, whatever your drink of choice is going to be,
Right.
make sure you're getting the electrolytes in during the school day.
Yep.
So that when you come out there, you're ready to go.
Yeah, and another thing is around planning. It's let's say it's long run Sunday, right? And you're going out on your long run. It's smart to think about, okay, I'll take a plastic milk jug and fill it with water with my electrolytes, and I'll hide it behind a tree at the 6 mile mark or wherever it might be. And it's there. You see it coming, and mentally you see it coming, and use that as part. In other words, instead of turning your training short, slow down, have a respite, have an oasis waiting on you, drink that, and then move on from there. And so planning ahead, planting those things on your course and thinking about it is really a great way to put. I think it's a great mental exercise as well. Hey, I'm mindful about who I am, what my needs are to manage the heat, to be a good performer, to extend my capabilities. I know what goes bad or why I had a bad outing 3 weeks ago was because I didn't do these things. So here's a new plan, and I'm going to plant this water or electrolytes further out on my course so that I can, again, I think it's just a great mental tool to know that you've put yourself in a position to perform well in that training session.
You practice what you're going to do on race day, right?
Yeah, right.
So if you're going out for your 20-mile run, simulate it to you're training for a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do at 45 minutes, hour and a half,
Right.
2:15? Practice those long runs like you're going to run the race.
Yeah. And a great time to get sick from something new is on a random training day, right?
Touche. Yes.
Not on race day where
Not
it's
on race
like,
day.
oh, let's walk through the expo here and I'll pick up 6 of these packets and I think I'll take this down at mile 18. Yeah, you just got to be smarter than that. You've put too much in it to try something new, but try new things in your plan, right? Whether it's hey, I'm going to wear this shirt. I'm going to try these leggings. I'm going to try these shoes. And I'm going to drink out of my neighbor's garden hose at mile 8 or whatever it might be. But try those things. A great time to fail is during training, right?
Yeah.
And learn about that from that standpoint. As we're talking about recovery, cold immersion to go to the extreme, and I talked about it with Boston Marathon, part of the protocol. And this has really come out of the Corey Springer Institute, KSI. If you're interested in all of their plethora of information about heat, illness, about training in the heat, the KSI, the Corey Springer Institute, it's at the University of Connecticut. Doug Casa great friend, has been the genius behind that program for 30 years. It's a great resource. Go to that website, and you can get a lot of information there about recovery. What are the effects of ice immersion? And they've really come up with, and this is something you can do in your own neighborhoods and your own communities, is have a discussion with your paramedics, with your fire departments, to ask them and just have a discussion and say, hey, if we call you to our high school and we have somebody who's in a heat emergency with a practice or something, what is your protocol? And asking that question. And the KSI, that Corey Stringer Institute, can help you walk through that communication. They can help you walk through, and I will offer this myself. If you need me to help you walk through that conversation with your local fire department or your various EMS services, we've done that here in Indianapolis. And it is standard in Indianapolis that paramedics with the various companies are very aware of doing cold immersion before you transport. And so the issue is, do you have the equipment for cold immersion? And that's a critical component from planning. I know that maybe some of the cross-country coaches and so forth have seen at some of their home football games some baby pools, right, on the sidelines. Well, those baby pools are there for cold water immersion of those football players. The same thing ought to be available at the finish chute of a Saturday cross-country event in September here in Indiana. There needs to be a place where you can immerse an athlete into ice water to help immediately cool their bodies. And so that's a planning. I wouldn't call it the extreme. It just needs to be part of the process. And so from that standpoint, from my view, what we've said is, you're done with the long run, you're done with training, cold shower, really good thing. And I know people don't shower. The athletes don't shower the way they used to. But I think athletes who are in hot weather, who are sweaty, they need to get that core temperature cooled down before they carpool with 6 other people who are sweaty and hot, and somebody won't speak up. Next thing you know, they're thrown up in the car. You've got a medical emergency, and so forth. And so really doing a cool down, whether that's wet towels even, can be a great advantage from that standpoint. Cold, ice cold, wet towels over the head and face and the neck can just be an extraordinarily big lift after hot weather exercise. So as we sort of get to the end here of talking about things, we have covered, we've covered hypothermia, where you get cold, and the symptoms typically between hypothermia and hyperthermia are pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Dizziness, disorientation, confusion, all of those words, right? And then the big difference is sometimes with heat illness, the person will stop sweating. Their sweating mechanism will stop, and you might go over to a system and realize their shirt might be wet, but their skin is dry. Red, hot. Yeah, they've stopped sweating. That's a medical emergency. On the other side, with cold, if they go over and they're just shivering, and they just, their lips shivering, and that's where I've seen it first, is in the lips and in the face, and then around the neck, they'll just start to shiver, and then the hands follow that. That's a medical emergency as well. You don't just walk those things off. And so if your medical plan around heat is call 911 and tell the parents to go pick the kids up at the emergency room, that's a bad plan. That is a really poor plan. You've got to get your team together, your athletic trainer, your community physician, your paramedics, EMTs, fire department, your coaching staff, and have a discussion. And if you start the discussion and everybody's confused and you're all in different places, that's okay. Work through it and get to a point where you have a plan and you have an agreement. And then when you have practice on a daily basis and something occurs, um, you can respond within that plan, and invite the paramedics to come and visit your school so they know where your cross country practice is taking place and where track is happening, and can they get in, and who has the keys to the gates, and all of those things that go along with emergency action plans. And I know within the sport of cross country, track and field, a lot of that, if not all of it, falls on the coaches. And because athletic training staff is typically limited, and they're usually going to go with collision sports. And it's hard to follow cross country because half of them might practice in the morning, half of them might practice in the evening. 3 of them go west and 6 of them go south, and let's all meet back here. Well, that's really hard for an athletic trainer to manage all of that. So that falls on the coach a lot. And so thinking through a plan, and if Scott and I can be a help to you, get in touch with us through my website at ralphreiff.com. You can contact us there. Be happy to help you. But if you don't do anything else out of this conversation we're having this evening, as a coach, as a parent, as a medical provider, think about the plan. What is the plan? Do I have a kiddie pool? Do I have a cattle tank? Do I have access to ice? When do we change practice time? What do we tell our opponents who are coming to our meet? And it is the hottest day we've had all August, and we've got our first meet today. How are we gonna manage that? Do we bring in more people? So having that stuff ahead of time, just like you plan your workouts, just like you plan your conversations with families and parents and kids, plan your medical process. So I will say, from a house cleaning standpoint here, Scott, we've got our great producer in the house, always taking care of us, with Tricia here at Round Table Recording Company in downtown Broad Ripple, Indiana. And they do a fabulous job here. And we will have these live podcasts will become archived, and those are being edited and produced. And those will be live on our YouTube channel, which is Fingerprints on Metals. And we've got some videos on there now from some meets that I've gone to and so forth. And but we'll get the podcast put up there, and then they'll also be available on Spotify and Apple and the various other outlets that you can get the podcast. But we appreciate your participation. We appreciate you being involved, and we hope these are educational. And Scott and I love working together. We think a lot alike, and heat scares me a lot. And so plan ahead, ask for help. Think about a weather service. Think about a plan. Go to your athletic trainer at your school and say, what's our plan, right? And sometimes they've got a plan. It just hasn't been communicated. Or it's for football and you need one for cross country. So let's help our athletes be as good as they can be, have the great experience, so that running becomes a lifestyle for them, and they enjoy it very much. Thanks. We'll see you on episode 3.